Monster Hunter Wilds is easily one of the most fun, impressive, and just overall one of the best games that has ever been released in the Monster Hunter franchise. But unfortunately, it's probably also the best game I can't recommend to anybody, at least if you're going to be playing this game on PC like I did. Because as of right now and as of launch, the optimization on this game, coming off another bad optimized game in Dragon's Dogma 2 that Capcom released, is absolutely unforgivable. It does not matter what PC you have, what setup or rig that you have, you are going to probably struggle getting 60 FPS on a consistent basis, especially during some of the later and bigger monster fights. Now, is this performance better than it was in the beta? Yes, it is a little bit more optimized from what it was there. However, even with a 3080 Ti, 11th Gen i7 with 32 gigabytes of RAM, I had to have frame generation on to consistently get above 60 FPS, especially in the late game. And of course, there's going to be some anomalies here that probably run this game well, but I can't recommend anybody buy this on launch and gamble away their money hoping that this game runs well. But even aside from all of this, the game's absolutely incredible, and it's pushing the boundaries of the Monster Hunter franchise in places that they never really have before, which I'm assuming is a big reason why this game isn't as optimized as it should be on release, at least again for PC. But before I get into specifics here and I break down everything in my review, thank you guys so much for over 1,000 subscribers. We're on the road to 2,000. I appreciate your guys' support. If you are new to the channel and you like gaming news and gaming reviews for RPGs and other games that I'm interested in, please like and subscribe this video if you do like what you see here. Now let's get into the review. Monster Hunter Wilds starts off with a few different cutscenes that are immediately going to throw you into these new lands that you are exploring, with a lot of introductions to characters that you're going to be going on this adventure with. And this very quick opening prologue to the initial story is going to set the groundwork for how they are doing a much more cinematic experience in this game versus previous Monster Hunter titles. From the jump, you can definitely see that this more cinematic story experience that is from the prologue throughout the entire game definitely is more related to them trying to capture this brand new audience that they got from World, or even the brand new audience that's going to be playing this for their first Monster Hunter game because of how big Monster Hunter Worlds was. That game really took this franchise into the mainstream, very similar to the way Elden Ring did for the Souls games. Maybe not to that extent, but pretty damn close. From there, you're going to immediately jump into a character creator, where the character creation in this game is really good. There are tons of different sliders, tons of different color wheels and options you can do for your hair or your skin color, or even the armor that you're going to be starting the game with. You can even customize your Palico, which is your cat companion that's going to fight with you and be with you throughout the entire game, that you can craft armor for and upgrade throughout the game as well. And all of this is just really fun to do right at the start of the game, and you at least get to make the character that you're going to be seeing consistently. You're also going to be hearing your character, and you can change what your character is going to sound like as well. And if you don't like your character as you go throughout the game, or you don't like your Palico and want to change what they look like, maybe to even suit your armor a little bit better, you can do this at any given time. You can change anything pretty much other than the gender. I had to change my character's voice because he initially sounded like a woman. I completely forgot to change his voice. So you can do that at any given time, which is really nice. Now, after this, you're going to start off into the main story quests. And this is one of the biggest negatives I have of this entire game. As I mentioned, this game does try to be more cinematic. It does put a bigger focus on the story in general, as well as the characters, and trying to make them relatable, and just trying to make the characters mean more to the overall story in general from previous Monster Hunter games. But without going into any spoilers here, aside from the performance, the story in general is one of the biggest negatives I have of this entire game. Now, the first big reason here that this is a negative is the pacing of the story that you're going to notice directly when this game starts. Because you go from fighting a monster, having a bunch of fun, cooking this monster to death immediately, popping off with all your combos, to sitting there in dialogue, cutscenes, and just walking around without able to grab pretty much any of the materials around you for hours. It was genuinely boring to me, and the first night that I played this game, I struggled getting through the beginning. In addition to this, you don't just go from one area to the next with completing everything in that first area. You're jumping from area to area to area to area so fast that you never feel like you're learning the maps or you're learning the monsters in the previous areas that you were in. You'll go from the first area to the second area to the third area, back to the first area to the fourth area, back to the first area, and it just doesn't have any continuity. It doesn't make any sense. And the next thing here with this story is I don't feel like it does a very good job of actually getting newer Monster Hunter games used to a lot of the mechanics here. There are tons of mechanics with your weapon that they just don't teach you at all. My brother, for example, he hopped in this game for the first time since Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, I believe, on the PSP. There was a ton of different combos and things with his weapon that he was completely missing that he didn't know how to use. The codings were completely confusing to him. On top of this, he barely ever cooked. He barely ever put down a portable grill because he didn't necessarily even know that existed. The pop-up camps throughout the map are not explained, which, just if you haven't played the game, the pop-up camps are basically an extension of that base camp where you can do everything in. You can change your equipment, you can grill meals, you can post or join different quests and fight different monsters from there throughout the world. You can do all that through your pop-up camps and be a lot closer to monsters out in the world. All of this just really isn't explained very well, especially to a new player who is focused on that more cinematic story. But this game definitely doesn't shy away from teaching a lot of the new mechanics in this game. Mechanics that weren't in Monster Hunter World, for example. First is the mount. Obviously the mount was in Rise, but it wasn't in World, which a lot of people who are playing this game are coming from. The mount is a great addition here in a lot of different ways. I love how there's also auto-pathing on the mount, so you can use your whetstones and sharpen your weapon throughout the monster fight or while you're chasing a monster, or use potions, or use different hot and cold drinks as pretty much you're going around the world and you're not having to stand still or waste any time while doing this. There's a brand new combat mechanic here that is called the focus mechanic, where you can do focus strikes on different wounds that you cause on enemies. I'll dive a lot deeper to this in the actual combat section of this video, but this was another thing that right at the start of the game that they teach you very well. They also teach you very well about the changing of environments within all of the different areas that you go through in throughout this story. Like, for example, when the first area causes a whole lightning storm and the monster that accompanies that lightning storm and that might arrive when this is happening, or what monsters might come out during the day or during the night. And throughout the story, you're going to fight these monsters in different quote-unquote seasons that these different maps rotate through, and be able to fight these different monsters in regards to the time that accompanies them actually coming out into the world, which I think is great. And of course, it's going to show you how to use the environment to fight these monsters, how to use the environment to help support yourself, or to craft different potions that you're going to need throughout the game in general. On top of this, it's going to teach you about traps that you can use to fight your monsters in an even better way and get a ton of different hits off that you wouldn't otherwise get. And all of this is great. It's not like they don't do a good job at explaining anything here. It's just there are things that they didn't explain where they're completely missing. And a lot of those things, unfortunately, are core mechanics to the game that I think they're expecting players to already know. Now, moving on into other parts of the story, just in regards to the characters here, I did not like a lot of them. I thought a lot of them were very basic. Their dialogue was very rudimentary, and just in general, I think they were definitely targeting the storyline and specifically the characters in this game and the way they interact with each other. It's definitely targeting a much younger audience. Me, as someone who's almost 26, I really like games that go into a little bit more of those mature tones. However, some people are really going to like this. Again, the target demographic and audience might really enjoy this as well. It's just something I personally didn't love and thought they could have done a better job of, and I kind of just tried to get through the story as fast as possible to experience the parts of the game that I really did enjoy. And what I did really love was the classic Monster Hunter gameplay loop that is still very much here, and in my opinion, even enhanced from previous titles. You're going to cook up a meal, which is going to give you different benefits, which you can actually go out and find different materials to craft even better meals and give you even more benefits. You're then going to either join a quest. Maybe it's a multiplayer quest where someone has an SOS flare that they shoot into the sky, or you're going to go on an optional quest, or even a main story quest, or after the main story, you go out and you just try to fight a monster that's roaming out within this open world, depending on the different season that you're currently within in that map. From there, you're going to hop up on your mounts and you're going to auto path your way, or you can just run normally, but for me, I just auto-pathed my way while I was collecting all of the different materials that I may need on the way there. I would fight the monster, carve up the monster, collect the rewards, and then I'd either go to another monster, fight that monster again if I didn't get the reward that I needed, or I'd go back to my base camp, and then I would craft the different weapons or armor that I needed to get even stronger. And although, yes, this is a relatively similar gameplay loop, it is still so damn fun. It is still incredibly addicting. And on top of this, there are a little bit of changes here in Wilds that I think are incredible. The fact that this is open world and some monsters only show up during day or night or during certain seasons within the game is awesome. And it really changes up and makes that monster hunting loop very refreshing. I was constantly checking my map to see what different enemies or what different monsters I could fight at any given time, and if I needed that monster or not, or if it was an unidentified monster that I had never fought before. They obviously brought back tempered monsters, so once you get into the high rank, you're going to get harder versions with even new mechanics than the original monsters that you fought in the story and within the low ranks. There's even difficulty rankings of these tempered and normal versions of every single monster. You might find a tempered version of a monster that's difficulty rating 3, and you might find that exact same monster have a difficulty rating of 5, which you're going to be able to see by looking at these little purple stars below their names. And if you fight these harder versions instead, number one, they are infinitely harder than the lower level ones, but on top of that, you're going to be getting more resources from killing them. It is actually going to show you what type of resources that specific monster and that specific investigation is going to have when you're fighting it, so you can target farm a common resource versus a more rare one versus that actual gem, etc. So they definitely have a lot of differences as well as similarities to freshen up, but also keep that same classic Monster Hunter formula. And obviously this is all held together by some of the absolute best combat I have played in any game. I personally played the longsword. Please do not flame me. I understand everybody gets flamed for playing longsword, but I've been playing longsword since I was in middle school at this point in the Monster Hunter franchise. The biggest addition here though with every single weapon is that focus mechanic I mentioned earlier. You can hold your focus and see if you have caused any wounds on the enemy, and these wounds are going to be caused based on how many times you hit certain different parts of that monster. So when you end up causing that wound and you use a focus strike directly on that wound, it is going to cause a stagger or even a lot of times a complete knockdown of the monster you're fighting. Now granted, there are still areas that you're supposed to hit on a monster as well, and there are going to be some areas that take less damage, but this at least makes it to where you can hit any part of the monster and cause a wound in any part of the monster and still do a decent amount of damage. So you don't only have to focus on the head or the tail of specific monsters, you can focus anywhere, get a wound to show up there, and then do a wound strike, and then while they're knocked over or staggered, focus on the highest damaging parts of that monster. I really enjoyed this mechanic, and I loved how fluid it could be in the middle of my combos with the longsword, but on top of this, it also gives you a little bit of a reason to use a second weapon as well, because if there's a wound on the top of their back, or there's a wound on the top of their head, or somewhere that you aren't always able to hit, you can use another weapon to get up there and hit that wound a little bit easier with their focus strike. So it does give a lot of players an incentive to use a separate weapon that they're able to use to hit that wound. So not only is it a gameplay mechanic that I just really love with my main weapon, but it allowed me to actually finally go and try out some different weapons, which I don't normally do within Monster Hunter. I've always been more of a get every single weapon in the entire game for the longsword and use a different weapon and different decorations versus whatever boss I was about to fight. Now, does this mechanic make the game way easier? We will get to that later. You're also going to be fighting with your Palico, and your Palico you're going to be crafting equipment for and crafting different weapons for to help you out in different fights while you go through that gameplay loop. And just in general, if you need healed, your Palico is going to heal you. If you need something cured, your Palico is going to cure you. If you need a trap down, your Palico is going to throw a trap down. And with how OP the Palico is in this game, does it make the game a lot easier? We will get to that a little bit later too. You're also going to be able to fight on your mounts. You can only switch weapons on your mount, but whatever weapon you have, you're going to be able to fight on your mounts. And this is going to enable a lot of different plays. As a longsword person, I jumped off my mount and got a ton of mounting on the actual monster I was fighting. I would cause a wound on top of his back. I would jump off, do a ton of damage, and get a bunch of free hits in there. Even if you get knocked down, you can call your mount as many times as you want if you get knocked down, and he'll immediately pick you up. You don't even have to wait that recovery time. And does the mount in this game, especially the recovering with the mount, make this game way easier? We will get to that later as well. But in general, the combat system in this game is S tier. It is the best, in my opinion, that has ever been in a Monster Hunter game, and it feels amazing when you're out in the world ripping up all of these different monsters. Now granted, I will say I haven't used every single weapon in this game. I have talked to people that have used other weapons, and I have tried a couple other weapons out myself, specifically some of the ranged options like the bow I've been using a little bit more lately, and they all feel incredible. But from what I've heard too, everybody loves the single weapon that they are using, and from what I've also heard in the overall Monster Hunter community, it's some of the most balanced these weapons have been in a long time. Now, how are you actually going to get stronger within combat? Well, this is going to be a ton of different things in this game. So first, you can obviously do the general, just crafting and upgrading your armor. So you craft it with different materials that you're going to get throughout the world from different monsters, and then you are going to upgrade it through these things called armor spheres that you get from doing different quests out in the world as well. You're also going to be able to craft whatever weapon you want throughout the world, and you're going to upgrade this into different forms of that same weapon as you kill newer bosses and unlock those newer forms of that weapon. And you're not only going to be doing this for yourself, you're going to be doing this for your Palico too, as I mentioned, crafting him different weapons and different armor that's going to be suitable for whatever fight you're going on. And in general, his are way easier to craft, so always make sure you're crafting and not forgetting about your Palico. Now, these different weapons and armor are going to have something called skill effects on them that are going to benefit your character in a specific way, and this is really how you're going to refine your build into how you want to specifically play. For example, my biggest offensive skill that I used was called Burst, and this would be basically if I consecutively hit a monster without being hit by that monster, my damage would keep increasing. On the defensive end here, I use Divine Blessing, where depending on the level of Divine Blessing I have, if it procced, it would reduce the amount of damage I took by anywhere from like 10 to 50% if you have the max level of Divine Blessing. And there are so many different skill effects in the game, and as you go throughout the game and get into the high rank, armor, for example, is going to have way more than just one skill on it, so you can start using 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different skills that all work together to suit your specific build and how you like playing. Armor in this game is also going to have set bonuses on them, both 2 and 4, as well as a 3 set bonus called a group bonus. Now, that group bonus might not be from that same set, but it has to be the same style of armor. So if I have 3 different types of Guardian specific armor, then I will get a benefit of fighting Guardians out in the world. Now, the set bonuses that I used for 2 and 4 increased my burst. So I had maximum burst for my skill effects, and then I had a set bonus for 2 that increased my burst, and then I got an enhanced version of that set bonus once I got 4 pieces of that set that increased my burst when it activated even more. But that is still not all. Armor and weapons are also going to have something called decoration slots on them, especially as you get into the high rank version of these different monsters and the high rank version of these different armor sets and weapons. And these decorations are also going to go into your armor and give you more of those skill effects. So if you have maxed out skill effects from your armor and your weapons, you can actually add these to increase your skill effects or put on new skill effects to your armor and to your weapons, which are going to make you even more powerful and even more going to help you refine your build or even expand your build into how you want to play. Now, I will say the decoration system in all of these games has been a little bit annoying. In general, you can't necessarily target farm the exact type of decoration that you want. You kind of just have to get lucky with it. In this game, you can target farm it a little bit more than in previous games by looking at the different rewards below the boss before you fight it. However, it is still going to be annoying if you want a specific one to give you a specific skill effect and you can't get it. Now, lastly here, there's also something called an artisan weapon. I mentioned only being able to upgrade weapons to the next form. Well, these ones you can actually upgrade the base damage and the elemental damage or whatever it may be for these weapons. And you're going to be crafting these not by using the monster materials, but other materials you find when you go out and complete different investigations or just fight different monsters in general. And again, these rewards, if they have them, will be shown under the monster when you're looking at them on the map. And you can really make whatever type of weapon that you want. If I want to make a fire damage weapon that has more damage than it does crit, I could make that. If I wanted to make a dragon weapon that has more crit than it does damage and focuses more on that, I could do that as well. And like I mentioned, you can even upgrade these to be absolutely insanely overpowered by using different ore that you find out in the world and like melting them into it to increase, or it calls it reinforce this weapon, to increase the elemental damage or attack damage, as I mentioned. So with the progression, it's very good. There's a ton there, like always. It's going to be, in my opinion, a lot faster to get everything you need because of that target farming that is a lot easier to do than in previous games, but it's still an absolute blast. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of different builds that you can do, especially with different weapons that are very unique, very cool, and will fit the exact type of gameplay style that you want to play as. And that's something all of the Monster Hunter games have always done extremely well. Now, before I get into my negatives, I do want to talk about just some small things in this game that I thought were added that were absolutely incredible that I haven't talked about much here. One is the map. The map was changed from a 2D map to more of a 3D map that you can zoom in, move around, and see the different levels because there are so many different levels to each of these maps, and I thought this was an incredible addition. Being able to grapple hook different materials out in the world while you're, for example, auto-pathing to the main hunt and the monster that you're fighting is such a good mechanic. You don't have to run over to each piece of material that you're trying to pick up out in the world. Lastly, something I really love here is you can do everything out in your tent, whether it's a pop-up tent or in the base camp. You can join or post a quest here. You can pass time to make sure that a certain monster spawns in your area. You can change all of your equipment and decorations, change all of your appearance options for you, your palico, or even your mount. You can grill a meal right before you go out on your hunts. You can pretty much do anything here, and I do really appreciate that. I do quickly want to talk about my biggest negative here. I've already mentioned, obviously, the performance as well as the story. These were my other two biggest negatives aside from this, so I've kind of talked about those at length, so I want to focus on this, and that is the difficulty. I will say base Monster Hunter, before they actually add new monsters and Master Rank and the DLC, etc., base Monster Hunter's never been very hard, ever. And I'm not talking about when back in the day there just wasn't great controls because it was hard because of that, or just in general because I didn't know anything about the game. This one genuinely just does feel like the easiest Monster Hunter game I've ever played, even at base, even easier than World or Rise. And I hinted at some reasons why earlier when I went through the combat, but a lot of times these monsters on the jump and just their movesets seem like they, in my opinion, would be harder. But I never failed a mission, not once throughout all low and high rank, and I never completed a monster in over 15 minutes. I was under 15 minutes for all of my hunts, again, both for low and the high rank story. That also includes the optional monsters that aren't part of the story. The side quests, I never failed. Just going out on my own hunt or investigation and fighting multiple different monsters, a lot of times the tempered versions. I fought every monster in this game, including every version and every difficulty of that monster, and I have never failed. Now granted, I have played a lot of the previous Monster Hunters. I set up my build before I go out onto a hunt perfectly, so I have the specific type of elemental damage, a specific skill effect that might work really well on a certain monster. I deck out my palico. I do deck all that stuff out, so other people who aren't as used to this game or don't do that might have a harder time, especially with the tempered versions of some of the really harder monsters. But I think there's really three big reasons here. The first is the focus strike. Any weapon in the game can pretty much get a stagger or knockdown, which includes a lot of free hits whenever you really want to, which pairing that with obviously your traps, environmental damage, things like barrel bombs, etc., you're crushing these monsters very quickly, and they have, I think, probably a little bit too low of health thresholds. But your palico is also just too OP. He is too OP in this game. When I say he's going to heal, cure, or put a trap on the monster whenever you want / need, he's going to do that. He's going to consistently be rocking on that monster for you and pretty much shaving you through any single dilemma. And when you then pair that with your secret, with your mount, that it pretty much cancels any recovery to where you never feel like you're in danger, where you go down, you call him as you're going down, and the second you hit the ground, he picks you up, runs you all the way, and you can just heal up, sharpen your weapon within seconds to go back into the fight. It just makes this game insanely easy. Now, is this game being super easy necessarily a bad thing? For me, It is a negative. I wish it was a bit harder. I don't want it to be a ton harder. I don't think games need to be hard to be fun. I think they need to be fun to be fun. But I do want some challenge, right? I don't need it to be difficult. I do kind of want it to be challenging. Although I would like to say, when I go on multiplayer hunts, there are many times where my party members die and we fail the mission. So maybe it is a little bit harder for other people. I don't 100% know. Now, aside from this, just some other small negatives and things that I think they can improve. Specifically with decorations, maybe I just missed this, but I know it wasn't like this in World. I wish if I had like 10, 15, or 30 of one decoration, I could just trade that in for a higher tier of that decoration. That would be fantastic. I also really miss the Gathering Hub. I think the pop-up camps were like the biggest thing that kind of took place of the Gathering Hub, and I do love how you can do anything from your camps. But just in general, the pop-up camps just don't really offer much benefit because you can do all of that within your base camp as well, and your mount can just run to wherever you need to go so damn fast, and you can autopilot and grab all this different stuff on the way there that you really don't ever need to go to or spawn your own pop-up camp. And lastly but not least, I still just think, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the story, I don't think this game explains things to new players very well, and I think it's very overwhelming, specifically with how many different options there are and how kind of unintuitive the menu systems are. I think it's very hard for a new player at the start not to get overwhelmed here. They are going to miss a lot. For example, there's side quests that give you the power charm and the armor charm. Even as a seasoned player, I was continuously looking, when can I buy this? When can I buy this? When can I buy this? Come to find out, it was in my bank and I didn't even see it pop up on the top right of my screen as a quest reward, and I just kind of missed out on a long time without my armor and power charms. But all in all, these are very small negatives, I think. Even the difficulty, in my opinion, is a small negative because I don't think being easy is necessarily a bad thing for the game. And I know with the DLCs and the Master Rank, they're going to be way harder than it is now. It's like that in every single Monster Hunter game, and I'm very excited for that. They do a great job of adding hard event quests and just new content in general that I can't wait to play. Now, aside from this, the biggest negative is definitely that performance, as I've mentioned. I cannot recommend this game right now to PC players. I just can't do it. Don't gamble with your money until it's fixed, and maybe you even get it for a less price. And the storyline, I think some people actually might like it. I personally just didn't enjoy it, but that's okay. But aside from these negatives, this is still an absolutely phenomenal game, and I loved it. And the things that they do well, I think they do the best out of any other Monster Hunter game. And the things I enjoy, I think they did the best versus any other Monster Hunter game. The gameplay loop here is obviously very familiar, but the ways that they have made it fresh are great. On top of that, they have made the combat in this game, like I mentioned, the best they've ever made the combat in any Monster Hunter game, at least in my opinion. The progression here is still amazing, and I absolutely love going through that end game grind and getting everything I need to be as overpowered and strong as I possibly can be for any monster I go up against. And the way that they have just done the environments in this game is incredible. The way they change seasons and monsters are always roaming around, fighting each other and living and doing what they would do in their own ecosystems. It just makes so much sense, and it's so damn fun, and it's an evolution of the series that I not only think was welcomed, but one that it also needed to just go to that next level. But with all that being said, I'm going to give this game a 7 out of 10. The reason I'm giving it a 7 and not higher is because the performance issues are a big bummer. Without those, this game could easily be an 8. And with some more difficult content and additional content that's going to be added in, this game's obviously going to be up there as a 9 out of 10. And in my personal opinion, with a better story and then also making this game more digestible for newer players coming into the series, that is how they could get to the 10 out of 10 mark within the next game. I would love to hear down below in the comments, just in regards to some of my negatives, if you're experiencing or agree with these as well. Do you think it's too easy, or do you like it? Are you experiencing any performance difficulties on PC? Are you on console and haven't really seen any of these? What do you think in general about the overall game? Is this one of your most favorite or one of your least favorite Monster Hunter games? I would love to know your guys' perspective down below in the comments and start a discussion there. Thank you guys for watching the video. Again, if you're new to the channel and you liked what you see here, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.